Oh, I've missed that music. Hello, and a very warm welcome to the first Total Saints podcast of 2022. Happy New Year. I'm Martin Starke, and I'm joined by our panel of Saints experts to discuss this in a busy couple of weeks supporting Southampton Football Club. We're streaming this episode of TSP Live on our Facebook and our Twitter pages, and it's also available on our YouTube channel. Now, if you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, you can get involved in the conversation using the comments section. It's always lovely to hear from you. Coming up this week on the podcast, reaction to the Newcastle game being postponed. We'll also look back at the festive fixtures with West Ham and Tottenham, and we'll preview the FA Cup third round tie with Swansea. But first of all, let me introduce you to our regular TSP guests. Steve Grant is the owner of SaintsWeb, which is the independent Southampton FC website. Steve is still in Dubai, so how's your Christmas been over there, Steve?
It's very different in that I got to spend it on the beach in
rain
in
on
sunshine,
Christmas Day, by the way.
No, Christmas Day was fine. It was over New Year. We've basically had an entire year's worth of rain in space of 2 days. All you climate change people, there's one for you. It's it's been different, but good fun.
And a decent firework display for New Year's Eve. That looked good.
Yeah, it was good. Went down to the there's a sort of shopping centre and restaurants and stuff all on the coast, sort of out looking to the sort of fairly famous Atlantis Hotel, where they do all the fireworks from over there. So you're probably 500 yards away, I guess. That's probably about the perfect distance to sort of see across the water for it. That's good.
Very good. Glen de la Cour is the writer of League One -10. That's the weekly Saints blog. How was your Christmas and New Year, Glen?
Relatively quiet, and didn't do a great deal. Didn't go out on New Year, mainly because I hate people. Nothing to do with COVID or anything like that. I just hate people. I was the taxi service for my kids, who and that was quite entertaining because they were all absolutely ruined. So it was just quite funny. The next day was amusing as well, but I'll leave that to your imaginations. But no, Christmas just saw me folks and my sister, and relatively quiet. But
good.
Saving it up for next year, hopefully.
Good to have you with us. Also, Dan Sheldon is the Athletics dedicated Saints reporter. Busy time of the year for you, Dan, with the games, or did you enjoy a day off on Sunday?
Yeah. A day off on Sunday for sure. No, I was actually managed to get some time off over Christmas. So I went away with my girlfriend to where she's from in Poland. So didn't come back until the 27th, and then obviously did the Tottenham game. Expected to do the Newcastle game, which I'm sure we'll touch on, but didn't get to that one. So
good to have you back, though. The biggest hello and thank you is reserved to our patrons wherever you might be listening or watching this week. A big hello and welcome to episode 181 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, Saints' home game against Newcastle was postponed due to coronavirus cases and injuries in the visitors' camp. So instead of a game at St Mary's on Sunday, we were all reduced to ranting about the decision in various WhatsApp groups and on social media. Do you want to start, Glenn? What did you make of it all? Deep breath. Here we go. Keep it clean.
Have we got the swear beat ready?
Yeah. Here we go. Right. Okay. I have a few problems with it. The first problem I have with it is Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe picked up the 2 injuries in the game they played against Manchester United. Immediately after the game, he was talking about getting the next game called off. Now, if you're a football manager, the first thing you think of when your centre forward gets injured is, okay, or in his case, he should have been thinking, okay, I'll put Joe Linton up front next week and I'll bring someone else into midfield or whatever. But he was talking immediately about getting their next game, which was against Everton, called off. So I have a problem that he was kind of verbalising that immediately after the Manchester United game. I have a problem that injuries are included in the count. That's absurd. Integrity of the league. We know the Premier League don't care about that. There's no integrity in the league. They don't care. They don't care. We know that. We were talking about it, the way they cram fixtures together and some teams get longer time off, all that sort of stuff. So they're not going to be remotely bothered if Callum Wilson, for example, is fit for the return game. they won't care if Newcastle have signed Aubameyang on loan, which is one of the more absurd rumours I've seen today, and he scores a hat-trick against us. They won't care. The thing I do not understand is why the Premier League have made it so relatively easy for games to be called off. I don't see where the advantage is in that. So that's one that maybe you guys have got some idea about. I don't understand why there's been 18 games called off. To my mind, in the Premier League, there should be none. I think Steve said earlier on in the week that Newcastle have got something like 65 players registered to play in the Premier League. And it's not just Newcastle we're talking about, let's be honest. It's other teams who've done it as well. If I'm being real conspiracy theorist about it, I didn't have a problem too much with Brentford at the time when they called their game off, and until I saw that they played Manchester City last week with what was an extremely patched up team. So to me, I was thinking it's almost as like they knew they were going to lose to Man City anyway, so it doesn't matter who they put out against them. Whereas Southampton is a chance for 3 points, so it would be very convenient to get that one called off. I also like the way that on social media, Newcastle fans, because they've all become entitled now, they're reacting like it's our fault for complaining and like we're being unreasonable. And then that seems to be a thing that follows when teams suddenly come into a lot of money. And you have to remind yourself that the average idiot on Twitter is not representative of the entire fan base. So so
it's Newcastle, so I don't know.
Yeah, so but I found I know Steve did as well. We found the Premier League statement quite interesting. That they said they don't have they don't have the specific information on who's injured and who's got COVID. Well, that means that they can't possibly restrict them from picking players in a rearranged game. So yeah, lots of issues with it. But we are where we are, and I think Ralph's kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, well, there's nothing much we can do about it. And I guess there isn't. But you know full well that we'll get beat in the rearranged game now.
There's lots of bits to pick out, Steve. I've got that Premier League statement. It says the board accepted the postponement application as the club does not have the required number of players available for the match, which is 13 outfield players and 1 goalkeeper. That's rubbish, right?
Well, it depends what criteria you use. I mean, if they're now, there's because when they first said that we'll listen to requests where the situation dictates, they kind of just said, oh yeah, the rules will be if you've got 13 outfielders and a goalkeeper, then you're expected to play. But they've since I don't know whether they've said it officially or whether they've just kind of issued a directive to journalists to kind of push this out there and say, actually, the proper criteria are actually these players have got to have at least featured for the first team in order to count towards the quota. But yeah, it's nonsense, isn't it? Let's wind the clock back if we with sort of gritted teeth 11 months to the start of February, where Saints have got 9 senior outfield players available, and we go to Old Trafford and get humped. Did we? I don't even know if we even asked the question because we didn't think
it wasn't a thing, was it?
No, you have to deal with injuries, and every club has got a 25-man squad that they register, plus all the under 21s that you can throw a stick at. And that was that. And we went out there and we played the game. Obviously now that game would be called off immediately. There'd be absolutely no questions asked. It would be put the application in. Here's the list of all the players unavailable. This is what we've got, and Premier League would be, yep, no problem. Game's off. We'll rearrange it for a later date. So it's absolute nonsense, and the fact that Newcastle have been so brazen, as Glen said, with Eddie Howe kind of preempting it, even like 3 or 4 days in advance. It's like, well, anybody who's from Newcastle and is travelling down for the game, you might as well claim a refund for your hotel and train fare now, because you ain't. That it's very clear that club's got no intention of turning up for that game.
Yeah.
And it's just a load of nonsense. I mean, all that's going to happen now is obviously every team who feels they've been slighted by them. I mean, weirdly, despite the fact it's Newcastle and they're, as things stand, still a load of absolute rubbish, teams are going to be raising their game against them.
Yeah.
There's a psychological thing there of, I mean, the fan bases are definitely going to want to beat them because of the inconvenience that they've been put through. And the players are going to want it as well, because at the end of the day they were ready to play, and we've, I mean, as we'll come on to, we've been in good nick the last couple of weeks.
There's an interesting thing there as well about post-COVID and how clubs might deal with injuries. And as you say, that match back in February that we don't really want to talk about, how that wouldn't have gone ahead given the current rules. So that'd be an interesting one to look at next year. Dan, you're often the voice of reason on this. Help us out. Is there an argument? Can you support it? Can you see why it happened, or is it about the integrity of the league, as Glen says, and does it just stink?
No, I think I, like many, the minute Wilson and St. Maximin went down, and then Eddie came out and started talking about all these cases they have and they need games called off, you immediately think then, well, the game's not going to go ahead at the weekend. And once the Everton game was called off, it was fairly obvious the Southampton game was going to get called off. And what frustrates me, I think, even as a neutral, is this shouldn't be about injuries. This should only be about COVID cases, as far as I'm concerned. Injury shouldn't be brought into it. Teams have injuries all the time, and they're not asking to get games called off because they've got injured players. And there's just no transparency. How many injuries and how many COVID cases have they got? If they've got one COVID case and 10 injuries, tough. That's just it. You know, if they had, for example, 10 COVID cases and 2 injuries, I'd say fair enough. But that's where there's no transparency, and that's the problem. So Southampton themselves, they have no idea how many COVID cases and how many injuries that Newcastle have got. They can, speak to various people, agents, whoever, who may have ins at Newcastle and find out. But even then, it's not going to be definitive. So I could sense the frustration building up within the club pretty much as soon as the Everton game got called off, to be honest, and Ralph, I thought, he was asked about it on Tuesday after the Tottenham game. He said, there's a suggestion that Newcastle want the Everton game called off. And just like deadpan, he was like, I think it was COVID injuries aren't COVID cases, or COVID cases aren't injuries. I can't remember which way around it was, but and that was his point, and that point still sticks. And it's the injuries that rankles with Ralph. He would understand COVID, but it's the injuries part which I think not many people can understand. It just, even I find it kind of baffling that they've managed to do this. And Glenn mentioned Brentford. I mean, Brentford chucked that game in because their goalkeeper wasn't fit. They were going to have to field an 18-year-old goalkeeper, and that's why that game got called off, basically, because it was like, well, the last thing we want is to go there with a kid in goal who's never played. And for Southampton, I wrote a column on this on The Athletic today, and they got to this stage last year, as Steve said, and went into the new year. They had, I think Alex McCarthy was positive with COVID now. I think Ings got it after the Liverpool game. And then they had so many injuries. So they deliberately thought, okay, well, we're going to add some depth. When it comes to this time next year, 2021, 2022, we'll take advantage of those teams that are now struggling because they've not got the depth that we may have. So they did all of the recruiting and so on. And it really counts for nothing now, because the 2 games they could have taken advantage, Brentford and Newcastle, they will now play those teams when they've got full strength 11s. And, Harry Kane, for example, may be lining up for Newcastle. Unlikely, but it could happen. Yeah. So no, I kind of, with the other 2, to be honest, I think it stinks. I think the Premier League are in a situation now where they've just got to bury their head in the sand, keep burying themselves even deeper until the end of the season, when they can sit down and possibly change it, because it wouldn't be fair to change the rules now, because you've already gone down this road. So they have to stick with it, as daft as it may be, until the end of the season, and then they need to look at it and think, right, okay, well, how do we learn from this? Because it was a bit of a shambles.
They're going to have to change it. They're going to have to change it, though, because sooner or later we're going to run out of spare midweeks.
All you do is you effectively penalise the. I mean, the way they've got to do it is you put the schedule together for the benefit of those who didn't call the games off. So the teams that had the squads available okay, those teams, okay, they're going to have to play one midweek game a week for, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks maybe, at some point in the middle of the season. Newcastle, if they want to cancel 5 games, tough, right? You play, right? You've got a game. You've now got a 2-week spell where you're playing Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, Wednesday, and you've got to make up the fixtures. It was your fault they were cancelled, so tough. I mean, kind of on a sort of related matter, I wonder what the broadcasters think of it, given that obviously they've reclaimed a significant amount of rebate from the Premier League, which I'm not sure the clubs were overly happy with in terms of the way the Premier League dealt with that. And presumably the broadcasters are going to think, well, hang on, we got some money back the last time. We wanted these games to be shown on a Sunday at 4:30, prime sort of football viewing time, and yet now we're going to be stuck showing Saints against Newcastle on a Tuesday evening when, quite frankly, nobody's really going to care that much.
Well, this feeds into my thing about why the Premier League have made it relatively easy to get games called off, because I see absolutely no advantages. The broadcasters are going to kick off. There's going to be fixture congestion.
It's mad.
It just doesn't make sense.
Palace on Boxing Day, they applied to the Premier League to get their game on Boxing Day postponed at 3 a.m.
And they had, am I right in thinking they had one change?
They made 2 changes, I think.
And it was a hamstring injury, wasn't it? It wasn't even COVID.
So it just shows that the system, I mean, of course, that game went ahead, but it's so easy to be exploited. And look, I made this point again in my column. Let's not kid ourselves. If it suited Southampton to get a game called off, they would be getting a game called off if they could. I think that should be said. But, as I spoke to someone within the club the other day, they could have chucked the towel in and got a game called off when Forster and McCarthy are out, but they thought, oh no, we're going to sign Caballero and Wade, because Ralph's kind of mantra is, no, let's just get on with it. Let's just crack on. It is what it is. We move on. They made the effort to sign a goalkeeper. Jack Stevens, returning from isolation, trained on Friday. He didn't need to train on Friday now. There was a suggestion that it could have been, because he'd just come back, he probably could have done with a lighter session. But they took that risk because they just thought, no, we get on with it. We make of what we've got and we get on with it. We're not going to have Salisu and so on. And that's the bit that I think kind of rankles. And if it was all COVID cases, you'd just say, okay, like whatever you're doing, you're obviously doing something wrong. Like, for example, Southampton, their team meeting took place outside on Friday. It was rubbish weather. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and feel sorry for footballers that have to do a 3-hour day and sit in the rain for a little bit to have a meeting. But, they're doing all they can to avoid COVID cases. And, they're preparing in the right way. And then a team can essentially just say, don't want to play this weekend.
Meanwhile, Leicester's entire first team squad turns up at the Alexandra Palace.
So what's Brendan Rodgers, who is so critical about kind of player welfare and such at the moment, what's he going to say to his players now that, have been at the darts, which, I mean, I have no idea if there's any kind of data from that.
Well, quite a few players pulled out during the tournament, having returned positive cases.
Yeah. So I totally can understand Southampton's frustration, and realistically, what can they do about it? Not a lot. I'd read a few places about that they'd lodged a complaint. That's not the information I'd had. That's not my understanding. They've certainly made their feelings known, but as far as I'm led to believe, that's kind of as far as it's gone. There's been no kind of official complaint or anything like that.
We're quite weak with that sort of thing, though, aren't we? I mean,
I just think what's the point, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is that kind of thing. But go back to the Virgil van Dijk transfer. We put official complaint in for the blatant tapping up that Liverpool had done, flying him on that private jet all the way up to Blackpool to meet Jurgen Klopp, and yet, as soon as the transfer goes through, we withdraw that complaint. If we'd held that complaint and followed through with that, I mean, that was an open and shut case, and Liverpool were already under an embargo for signing youth players in similar clandestine situations, and the FA and the Premier League would have had to have absolutely hammered them, and then Liverpool would almost certainly wouldn't have won the title they won 2 years ago.
A couple of other bits on this. Glenn, you were talking about, and we have been talking about making any new signings ineligible or forcing them to sit out. Is that just talk of the moment? Is that sour grapes on our part? It's not going to happen. Are we going to feel differently in a week?
I don't think there's a precedent for that happening. I mean, the transfer window is rough.
There is for cup ties, though.
Yeah, there is for cup
and it
ties.
is the fairest thing to do.
Yeah.
So if you're not registered for the original cup tie, and you then sign a player between there and when the rearranged game gets played, that new signing isn't eligible.
Yeah,
I think it creates a massive issue personally, because I mean, I don't know what would happen in that scenario, but if a team were relegated because a team that threw the towel in then went and signed 10 new players, all happened to be the best players in the world, and were relegated because they lost to, I don't know, a goal that was scored by a player that wouldn't have played that match when it was supposed to go on. I mean, is there a legal avenue there? I have no idea, but you wouldn't be surprised. I think it's massively unfair.
It is, but it goes back. I don't think that they don't care. They don't care about integrity issues. Yeah, they might do if they got sued. I mean, think back to the Carlos Tevez Mascherano thing.
That's the one example I was trying to think of.
With West Ham and Sheffield United.
Yeah.
I think Sheffield United got some money out of West Ham, didn't they?
But that was a civil case, not a.
And they were still relegated, weren't they?
Yeah, it didn't go through the Premier League or anything like that.
No,
I guess it depends what other cases, what other games get called off. At the moment, we've got a really good case. We've been arguing about it for 20 minutes now. There might be others. It just needs one of the top six, I think, to be in a similar position. George agrees with us. He says exactly what we're saying. Why should games ever be postponed for COVID cases? Surely it's the club's responsibility to keep their players safe and well. And if they haven't, then it's tough. And I think, as you said, Dan, today, the players are even changing in the car, aren't they? That's how seriously they're taking it.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, Southampton in there, but even then, that's still, they're still getting positive tests at Southampton. But
Shay Adams, wasn't it?
They are taking it to like the nth degree to ensure that they don't. So that's why
I think if a club gets so many cases that like they have to shut the training ground for a couple of days, as Man United did before Christmas, then I've got, to be honest, I've got no particular issue with them calling off the game immediately after that, because you've had no training time. So you're probably causing injuries in that situation, forcing them to play. But I think if you're still training, but you've just got loads of injured players. I mean, Newcastle's situation, basically all these players are picking up injuries because Eddie Howe's actually making these lot run.
They're not used to it.
I just think,
exactly. This is it. I mean, that Man United game, they were all dead on their feet up with about 25 minutes to go.
There just needs to be transparency. I think that's all there needs to be. There needs to be that when, I don't know, if let's say Newcastle got the game called off, there needs to be in the statement a breakdown, right? Okay, 7 players from the first team tested positive, 10 staff members tested positive, because all of it at the minute it all rolls into one. So you could be, an employee at Newcastle who is part of the testing bubble that might just be in their communications department. You would class as a positive case at even though you've got nothing to do with the kind of first team, the training or the playing, you're still a positive case. So I just think there needs to be an actual breakdown. So it just needs to be transparent, and fans might then understand it more. But there's not. It's just the whole, we don't know the specifics. We're not going to tell you the specifics. Well, so no one knows why it's been called off then. Is it because I'd be
all in favour of this NFL style injury report.
Every
club every day has to release a report of who's injured, who's available, who's kind of doubtful for the forthcoming game, this sort of thing.
But the NFL are miles ahead in so many departments.
It would certainly make picking a fantasy football team a bit easier, that's for sure. The other thing I wanted to touch on is the 5 subs, because that's something which has been going around at the moment, again, as it always does when you get the COVID cases. Pep Guardiola has been...
He won't use 3 subs.
I think there are 4... Is it 4 instances? I'm not right in saying there's 4 instances where a manager's not made a single sub in the Premier League, and it's him. He's responsible for 2 of those games, and now he's quite vocal about the 5 subs. Is that an option, do you think, Steve? Do you think that's still on the table?
I hope not. And I find it slightly odd that that Ralph has actually come out very much in favour of going to 5 subs, because I don't see how that possibly helps us from a selfish perspective, or indeed any club beyond the top 5 or 6 really. because we don't have the ability to. While our bench is now largely full of actual first team players, as opposed to dipping into the under 23s for someone to fill a seat. We're not at the level where we can. I mean, Man City left Phil Foden out of their entire matchday squad for the Arsenal game. And it's like, I mean, we're not ever going to be in a situation where we can leave a £50 million player sat at home for a game just because, well, we've got too many. So yeah, you can have a few days off, mate.
Of course, the other thing, Glenn, is that we're talking about it as if Newcastle are actually going to sign some decent players in January, and that might not be the case because there's lots of talk. I mean, some of it in the Daily Mirror, for example, but a lot of talk about who they might sign. But you still got to convince them to go to Newcastle and play. So,
well, yeah. To be honest, who they sign ain't really the issue for me. I mean, you play a team at the start of the season, they've got one squad. You play a team the second time, they've got another squad. That's life. It's extreme this year because it's Newcastle, because they've had a takeover in the first half of the season. So you expect them to have different players. But yeah, I mean, they're not going to be signing Mbappe or Harry Kane, are they?
There's not an issue if they sign players. I mean, I think Newcastle are a massive club. It would be great to go and see them sign top players and get back up the table. But those top players should not be allowed to play in games that have been called off, that they were not out of the club. That would be if they'd signed Mbappe on January the 1st, fine, he can play. But if they were to then go and sign Mbappe on January the 3rd, that is when I'd have an issue with it, because I just don't think it is fair on the competition. Where's the fairness in that?
Let's talk about the games that did go ahead, which seems like a long time ago now, to be honest. 3 goals on the road at the London Stadium. A nice, unexpected 3 points there, Steve. None of us predicted that. I mean, we never get them right anyway, but I don't think any of us thought we were going to win at the London Stadium. So that was a nice surprise. Yeah,
and I mean, it's a strange situation, isn't it? That basically every game that we've played at that ground, the winning team has scored 3, and it's particularly odd given that we were decent at Palace, weren't we? But in the run before that, we were looking just frustrating more than anything, which has kind of been our default setting all season, really. But yeah, I don't think anyone expected us to go to a ground where A, we have a terrible record, and where B, you're actually coming up against a genuinely good West Ham team at the moment, and to beat them. And to be honest, I mean, while the scoreline looks close, I think we were comfortably the better side in that game. Yeah. And it was only for a couple of our predictable sort of defensive lapses that West Ham even made it close, I think.
I was going to say some typical Saints defending, but a change of formation, Glenn, and some surprise around the starting lineup. I knew we talked about him shuffling the pack and having to make the most of that squad depth because we thought there were more games coming. But I don't think any of us would have called that formation and that lineup.
It was interesting because when you see the list of 11 players, you obviously don't know what the formation is going to be, and is it going to be Walcott up front? Is it going to be Redmond up front? And ultimately it's a 4-1-4-1 formation with Elyounoussi in the centre of midfield, really next to Ward-Prowse, and it worked really well. We won the game because we scored goals at the right times. We took advantage of the dominance we had early in the game. It's a brilliant goal by Elyounoussi. I think Saints have actually put the footage up of the move when it started, and it starts right at the back, and we go forward, backwards, all the way around, and eventually scored a goal. It's a brilliant goal. But the key to winning the game was reacting the way we did to West Ham's goals. Yes, both of their goals were poor from our point of view, but winning the penalty straight after Antonio's goal. And when West Ham came back to 2-2, I was just thinking, we're going to lose this 3-2 now. But we scored again within a couple of minutes. And from that moment on, we had something to hold on to, and we didn't ever really look like letting a goal in. And it was a relatively comfortable watch, which you can't say often when Saints are winning with 20 minutes to go. I didn't expect West Ham to score, whereas quite often when you're watching Saints in the last 20, you can just, every time they get over the halfway line, you can see it happening. But we looked solid. That started with the goalkeeper. He had one sort of flappy punch up in the air didn't he, Fraser? But he played well there. And it's nice to get a win at one of our graveyard grounds. And hopefully we can pick up a few more unexpected points over the next few weeks.
Yeah, it was a great game. Tottenham was the next game. Can you believe it? A goal from a Salazar long throw. That's because we were talking about that last week, Steve. I think that's because we were saying nothing ever happens, we never score, and then of course as soon as he took it, you're watching it thinking this is going to be the one.
Best thing is, I don't know if you've seen it on Twitter, but a lad I know called Sean Stroud, he's had similar thoughts and posted on Twitter quite a lot over the past sort of month or so. And for whatever reason, he decided, right, sod it, I'm going to film this terrible long throw just to illustrate how bad we are at these and how futile this exercise is. And obviously, he's filmed the goal. It's like, just absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, it was. I mean, let's be honest. It still wasn't a very good throw, and it's hit Dele Alli in the stomach and then onto his shin or something, and it's fallen nicely. I mean, that the technique in Prowse's shot though is something else. I mean, the keeper's got no chance because he's got four defenders literally stood in front of him. So Lloris has basically reacted to it after it's gone past him, so he's got just no chance at all. But the way it just kind of fades away to the right to sort of nestle in the side net is absolutely top quality.
What impressed you the most about that second half, Dan? I don't think we've got any complaints about the red card and Salazar getting sent off for that second yellow, but it wasn't what we were expecting that second half. I don't know where that performance came from. No,
it was really impressive. I think both halves were equally impressive, but for different reasons. We haven't seen, for a team that since Ralph has come in, drop points all the time from winning positions. And yes, they did drop points from a winning position, but it just felt a little bit different against Tottenham because no one really expected them to win that game anyway. And with the quality that Tottenham had on the pitch, yes, Southampton definitely rode their luck in the second half, I thought, in a big way. I mean, the goal, the offside, I mean, I'm not so sure. I've seen that a few times and I still don't think it's offside. But those decisions have gone against Southampton, so it's about time that they got one their way. The Fraser Forster one, I think he's not given that because it's just so weird. Like it just looked odd. I don't really think the Tottenham player's done too much wrong in that situation, but because it's just a weird looking goal, I don't know. I just thought that's probably one of the reasons why they're not going to overturn it. But just the way they kind of dug in with 10 men, and even at the end, they still created chances, like the Brozier one at the end. And then just as the referee blew his whistle for full time, there were like 3 Saints players running forward towards the goal with no Tottenham players anywhere to be seen. So that was a shame for the whistle to be blown there. But it just meant a lot for the mentality, I think, that, okay, we haven't won from a winning position, but this is a good team. They're going to be up there for the top 4. And we've managed to, not lose this game 3-1 or 4-1 after going down to 10 men. And as you said, I think no one's going to be complaining about the red card because it was an obvious red card. But one highlight of the Newcastle postponement is that obviously gets shifted onto the FA Cup game now. So Salazar will be back for the next Premier League match. So
yeah, so will Walker Peters, won't he?
No, he doesn't.
No, Walker Peters and will still be Premier League.
Oh, right. Okay.
The bookings ones,
which is incredibly weird.
Same competition thing. I mean, it must be an absolute nightmare if you're a club secretary for a non-league club who has to deal with all this, because the whole bookings in the FA Cup thing is a relatively new thing. It only came in, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and so you had a raft of players who, like in early preliminary rounds, had been sent off in a. They picked up bookings in the early rounds of the FA Cup, were actually banned for the next round, but thought they were eligible, having served a suspension in a league game. So you end up with all these teams in early preliminary rounds getting kicked out of the competition because they fielded ineligible players. Yeah, it's nuts.
Glenn, Dan mentioned Fraser Forster and that goal being ruled out. Did we get away with one there, do you think?
99 times out of 100 that gets disallowed because it's a challenge on the goalkeeper. Yeah. It's so it's one of those that I shrug my shoulders and go, well, that would have been disallowed if it had been up the other end. And we'd have all gone mental about it and moaned about how goalkeepers are overprotected. It's just a fact that that's the way it is. I mean, if it was two teams I didn't care about, I'd be saying that should be a goal, but it never is. So, yeah, we did get away with it a little bit, but we got away with the offside one more because, you know, as we know, this season those close ones are supposed to be given basically, and they're certainly.
Because the lines aren't touching, that means that it's wide enough for them to flag it. One thing I only noticed this week, actually, looking at the stills from that one, and I think it was Foden's goal for City, the goal for City away at Brentford, where Foden was ruled onside, was and this is something they've never, as far as I'm aware, they've never actually explained on the broadcast, and this has confused people with games where teams play in red and blue, opposite teams. So obviously Saints Spurs being a prime example, where Saints are in red and white, Spurs are in this blue and purple and all kinds of other colours of the rainbow, and it proper weird vomit looking thing.
I think that's how they describe it on the website, actually.
Yeah, and so what they've never explained actually is that the blue line is always the defensive line. Blue is always for the defence, even if the team defending is in red. And then the second line is drawn either in red or green, depending on whether he's on or offside. They've never explained this.
I never knew that, Steve. You're blowing my mind.
So you have all of these Spurs fans who are going absolutely mental because what they've seen on the TV is that the blue line is further away from the Saints goal than the red line. So they automatically think, well, it's the blue line. He's clearly onside here. They've got it wrong. There's a fault in VAR. Whereas actually, no, they've got it completely right. It's just nobody's ever explained the lines properly.
Well, thank you for explaining it, because I certainly didn't know that. So I've learned something tonight. Glenn, I just wanted to have a quick chat about Harry Kane, because I know you picked up on this and the fact that he was in the ref's ear all match, wasn't he?
Man. Well, Salisu got sent off, and I think we can largely agree that having got booked, he had to go. Salisu, he steams into every tackle he goes for. So if he doesn't make contact with the ball, it's very rarely there's going to be a foul where the referee's not at least thinking about booking him. And he'd done 2 of those before he got the third one. But you know, the third one which was pretty lame in isolation. But I think he got booked as much for totting up as everything. But it was the perfect Tottenham booking. So there's the merest of contact. The guy, and they've got a few of them, just rolled around like he'd been shot. Harry Kane gets in the face of the referee straight away. Out comes the yellow card. Now, when you notice it, it's one of those things you can't unsee. Every single decision where there's any sort of challenge, Harry Kane is around the referee every single time. He never moves that fast when he's on the pitch for England. but when it was remarkable how many times he was around the referee. And it was Bruno Fernandes does it as well for United. And there was that one earlier on in the season where Jack Stevens obviously told him to stop refereeing the game, which was actually really funny. That's one of the highlights of the season.
Strange that Fernandez's performances have nosedived ever since.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, Harry Kane, I just found him incredibly irritating. And Spurs as a team, they're horrible to referee. Coincidence or not, I think 3 out of the last 4 teams that have played them have had a player sent off. I mean, one of them was Wilfried Zaha, so that that's always going to happen. But,
doing Zaha things as well.
When you look at their team, they got Son, Kane, Reguilon, this Emerson Royale, Dele Alli. They all just collapse with the slightest touch, and
even Winks did it.
Yeah, it's just a horrible team to referee. So I do have a certain sympathy with Anthony Taylor. And, who knows, maybe that's why we got away with the Fraser Forster thing in the second half. Maybe he just got fed up with it. Yeah. I don't know. But, I mean, certainly if I was referee and there was a player in my face the whole time, I'd be sending him on his way with a yellow card, because it's just, it's hard enough job as it is. Just get out of my face.
Simon got in touch on the website, and I think he kind of sums it up. He says, I must say I was really proud of all the players. Fraser is better at game and time management. Long put in a complete shift. Prowse totally led the team. Valerie put in a shift as well. Adams playing at left back was awesome. I don't think any of us expected that at half-time. Fantastic team spirit. Brilliant from all. And the crowd also played their part. Keep it loud, Saints fans. Thank you, Simon, for getting in touch with that. Swansea next in the FA Cup. which is, I think, a 5:30 kickoff because it's on BBC Wales. All we know is that we're not going to be staying at the Marriott Hotel in Swansea. Do we know anything else about them, Steve? How's this one going to go?
The obviously the Michael Obafemi derby, but I mean they've been a bit up and down. Obviously lost their manager a week before the season started, so kind of threw them into a bit of chaos. But they've got so Russell Martin they poached from MK Dons, and he's kind of trying to take Swansea back to the sort of the old Swansea when they were good and they got promoted to the top flight under Roberto Martinez. So they're playing a very sort of nice to watch passing game. It does mean they've got a little bit of a soft underbelly, which hopefully is kind of where we're gonna kind of just nip in there and just stamp our authority on the game. And I mean, if Obafemi is the best striker, which I mean, let's be honest, he isn't, because he's not playing that much for him. He's already been called out a couple of times by Martin for his off-field lack of professionalism. It's like, well, yeah, I think we kind of all saw that one coming. But yeah, I mean, they're a decent side, but one that even with the likely 5 or 6 changes from what most of us would perceive as our best starting 11, I think it should still be enough to get the job done. Obviously, no replays as well that they've decided, which is kind of filling the hole that these COVID cases are causing.
Useful. Dan, earlier in the season, we spoke about the cup competitions and how important they were going to be, keeping some of the backup players happy, if you like. Has COVID changed that, or is it still a chance to change the whole 11?
I think it's still a chance to change the 11. They've got a lot of young players that haven't necessarily played as much as maybe they'd like to this season. So, yeah, for me, it's still a good opportunity for Ralph to rotate the squad, take the players out that really don't need to play this game. And I would include Ward-Prowse in that. I don't think he needs to play.
He won't want to start though, won't he? That's the thing.
Probably, yeah. But then I think at times, if you're Ralph, you just got to say, look, sorry, I know you love starting, but you don't need to start this one. Start Diallo instead or something along those lines. Then you've got players obviously coming back from COVID. So Lianco, I think he should be okay to make it, I think, depending on when he caught it. Stevens, these are the players you probably want to get back out there, give them a few minutes. And then obviously you've got Brentford. So the way I would probably view the Swansea game is kind of put a lot of the youngsters in, but also some of the more experienced ones that haven't played so much recently, just to kind of get them some minutes before that rearranged game against Brentford, because they have 3 games in a week again, don't they? So you want to get some kind of gas in their lungs for those games.
The other thing I wanted to talk about before we finish was Sam McQueen, the academy graduate who's opened up about his retirement. 26 years old. He announced his retirement on New Year's Day. It's been 3 years on the sideline. He had that awful knee ligament injury back in, I think it was 2018. Glenn, you've written a nice blog about this. We kind of feared the worst, but it's still sad to hear. Yeah,
it is. It's not surprising. But the interview with him, the little film that the club put out was tough to watch. I think when someone is a professional footballer, there's this sort of image around them that they've all got lots of money and they're financially set for life, and whether that's true or not, I think people tend not to be very sympathetic when and I found it really tough to watch because he's a Southampton lad. He was born in the city. He's been at the club since he was 8 or something, and he's come through and he's played in. It was interesting looking at the blogs that he played both games against Inter, and he played the Swansea away game where we won to stay up, and so that's 3 of our sort of most significant games over the last sort of 15 years. And he's played in all of those, so he's had some good moments. As a player, he was one that I was looking forward to seeing how he develops, because he was a winger. He became a fullback. He was very good going forward, Struggled a bit defensively at times, but he was getting better. He got in the England under-21 side, got a cap there. He was in front of Matt Targett for a while as our sort of backup left back to Ryan Bertrand. And we ended up selling Targett for 14 million. So, from the outside, you could say he's achieved quite a bit, but he's got to get his head around the fact that, he's not achieved what he's probably not achieved what he wanted to achieve in the game, and obviously finishing probably 10 years earlier than he originally intended. It's that's got to be a hard thing to get his head around. It's just a real shame when it happens, and it's worse when it happens to someone who's a local lad who's been with the club a long time. And I hope that if he wants to carry on in football, that in some capacity that the club support him in that, and I've no reason to believe that they won't.
And the club did all they could, didn't they, Dan? This was a bit of an unprecedented case, really, because he'd still been training with them up until recently and using the doctors and the rehabilitation.
No, yeah, they did. They gave him another short-term deal back in the summer up until January to again, hopefully get him fit and give him the chance to impress Ralph and take it from there. But I just think it's just horribly sad, really, as Glen's already kind of summed it up perfectly, to be honest. I think we always, you view footballers and you may have your kind of preconceived ideas, but, I've met and known enough of them to know they are just normal people. And for someone like him, he would have dreamed ever since he joined Saints at the age of 8. His dream would have been to play for the club. He's done that. He's played in some big matches for them. But as Glen said, he's retiring 10 years too early. Would he go back and do anything differently in that game against when he was playing for Middlesbrough? Maybe, but that's just the way that it's fallen for him. And everything I've heard about him is just so positive. Someone texted me last night saying, a nicer guy you will not meet in football. And I've never met him, but and then another club contact said, he would have been another Ward-Prowse. He's that kind of character, brilliant behind the scenes. And it's just horribly sad that it's ended this way for him. But, in those videos, he described that, he's got a family to think of, and ultimately, being able to play football with your kid down the park, realistically, will mean more to him than playing it on a professional stage. I mean, I don't know that, but I'd imagine that as a father that would be the case. So he's got to think about the rest of his life, not just the next 10 years of trying to play football, and what would the after effects be on his body if he carried on trying, I guess, is what he'd have to weigh up. So yeah, he's taken the decision, and it's sad.
Glenn mentioned a couple of games there, Steve. Are those the standout ones for you?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he was one of those players, I think, who, when he came in, you didn't necessarily notice an awful lot because he wasn't particularly flash. But then, by the same token, he never really made any huge glaring mistakes. So he was never one of these sort of players who you thought, oh God, why are we picking him again? Why is he in the team? But at the same time, it was quite rare to have a clamour of, oh, got to get McQueen in the team because he'll be a difference maker. He could be a difference maker on his day. I mean, that I think it was a Burnley game. I think Glen referenced in the blog he put together, where I think he might have come off the bench at half time and basically just tore through them. Won a fairly late penalty, I think, to make the game safe for us. And yeah, he could have had an impact. And yeah, it's obviously a shame the way it's all ended, because I think the idea of that Middlesbrough loan was that it was more a case of getting him some minutes under his belt.
The game time, wasn't it?
Yeah, because he wasn't getting a game, understandably, behind the likes of since we were out of Europe, sort of behind the likes of Tadic, and I mean even the strikers we were often playing. Obviously, Shane Long played out wide quite a lot and things like that. So it was about getting him ready for either kind of having another shot at it probably the next summer, or putting him in the shop window for a move elsewhere, which I think ultimately that would have probably been the most likely outcome. I think just the way football works, it moves on so quickly when you're out of the game for even 3 to 6 months. Clubs have to have contingencies, and they make contingencies, and unfortunately people get left behind, and that's been a bit sad. But it has been good the way the club has kind of dealt with it, and obviously, as Dan said, allowed him to continue to stay around the club for a fairly prolonged period of time. After it, I suspect in his heart of hearts, he knew that he knew from a fairly early stage. I think after the first kind of sort of relapse issue happened, I think that would have been the time where he thought, oh, God, this is a problem. And one thing that's actually been noticeable has been on social media with the players who wouldn't have played in the team with him were all sort of glowing with praise for the person that he was. Obviously, none of them have really seen him play football properly. So I think that speaks volumes for the kind of character that he's been sort of around Staplewood.
It showed in some of the games that he played as well, because he tended to play in games like the second round of the League Cup sort of thing. And back when Claude was in charge, we used to have those games where the other senior players who were in the side didn't care, and you could tell they couldn't be bothered. And he was always the best player in those games by a mile, because he had, it's the local lad thing or it's just his attitude. He 100%. Every sort of time he played, and that shone through when I was sort of like looking at it. He always, he never had a game where you thought, yeah, this guy's not trying, and you couldn't say that about all of them at that time. That's for sure, because those 2 seasons under Claude and Pellegrino, there was a few who phoned it in basically, and he was never one of those, and I think that illustrates his attitude as well. And again, it's not that you wish it on anybody, but it's never the ones you want it to happen to.
Yeah, it's dreadfully sad, and we wish him well. If you haven't seen the videos and you haven't read Glen's blog, for example, then it's worth checking it out. So before we finish, just time for our weekly patron shouts, and we start with another new signing. So hello to Ray Stacey, who's joined our Bobby Stokes tier this week. To find out more about becoming a TSP patron and the benefits that come with that, then do check out the website. Thanks as always to our Matt Letizier tier patrons. That's Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, and Phil Cook. Also Nick Reed, who's in our Francis Benali tier. My thanks to Dan, to Steve, and to Glen. Thank you, chaps. Happy New Year.
And Jim.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we forgot about that. Don't forget to follow this podcast wherever you're listening as well. On the socials, we are at Total Saints Pod. That's on Twitter and Facebook. You can drop us an email via the website at any time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and Happy New Year.